Grüß. Willkommen in einem aufregendes video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 52 of my figure gaming video series. This video is designed to assist players to construct a micro-armour force mix for the year 1939, using either squad, platoon or company scale rules, that is, each element equals a squad, platoon or company. In this video I'll be covering the German forces specifically. The objective of this video is to offer a force mix for any rules. However, different rules will require some minor adjustment to any force mix. For example, Panzer Corps allows you to deploy platoon-size supporting elements, even though it's a one element equals one company scale set of rules. I'll attempt to cover the most common differences, but people need to be aware of this. Should be noted, this guide is not suitable for Flames of War, as those rules have a reduced focus on historical accuracy and more on playability. Regardless, those rules have excellent guides which players can use instead of this video. At squad scale, I normally use Micro-Squad the Game, World War II as my guide. However, rules such as Blitzkrieg Commander, 2nd edition, Main Panzer, and Battle Group by Ian S. Clarke should all easily be able to use the force mixes provided. At a platoon scale, that's one element equals a platoon, my primary set of rules are Spearhead, but other rules such as Combat HQ, Kampftruppen Commander, and Combined Arms should all be able to use the force mix guides provided. Rules such as FFT3 uses special combat team element, which needs to be accounted for, but as long as you understand this, those rules can be used as well. At company scale, that's one element equals a company, my main guide is LWRS, or the reformatted version, Bevölkerungskrieg, but Panzer Corps can easily use the suggested force mixes provided in this video, as long as you take note of the support elements. When creating a force mix, we need to start with the parent formation, which in this case, or the case of the Germans, would be their Panzer Division, specifically the 1st Panzer Division. The defensive forces would come from an infantry division, German infantry division. This does depend on what style scenarios you wish to play, but as meeting engagements between equal forces provide a less than satisfactory game, I'm assuming you need a defending force. While you could use your attacking force in defence, in practice this may not be wise and leave you at a severe disadvantage. Using a squad scale set of rules, that is one element equals a squad, a player will need to deploy a battalion, both a defensive infantry battalion and an offensive mechanised battalion. In most cases, a player will need a battalion headquarters and from 2 to 3 company headquarters for both the defensive and offensive force mix. I like to make these elements interesting by including a staff car, truck, horse or other transport figures on it, with 2 figures on the company headquarters elements and 3 on the battalion headquarters. Heroic and Ross sells 6 command figures for 60p, with 2 packs meeting your requirement. Most squad scale set of rules do not cover any air-to-air combat, thus there may be no need to purchase any fighters. But as they may be used in platoon and company scale rules, I would consider it. You can also consider an observation aircraft, as some rules do deal with observation. Heroic and Ross offers the FW190E for £1 25p and the BF110 fighter for £1 25p. The Ju-87B Stuka dive bomber for £1 25p and the Frieda Storch observation aircraft for £1 50p. GHQ offers the 2 Me-109Es or 2 Me-110s for $11.95 US each and 2 Junkers Ju-87B1s for $11.95 US for 1 packet and 2 Fi-56 Storch for $11.95 US. The Germans fielded 2 types of field artillery, the 10.5cm and the 15cm howitzer, which would typically be off the playing area. At this scale, it would be rare for the 15cm to ever be fielded. GHQ offers the 10.5cm or 15cm for $11.95 US for a pack of 2 with mounts, which may be all you require at this scale. Heroic and Ross offers these 2 howitzers for 65p each. They also offer the tractors for 65p each. The primary anti-tank gun was the 3.7cm, which would have been towed by a light tractor. You would probably aim for 3 of these weapons in your force mix. The main anti-aircraft gun was the Flak 30 20mm gun, towed by a half-track tractor. The Germans may also deploy an 8.8cm Flak 36, but this would be rare at this scale. Both weapons were held at corps or army level, so would not be common. The Germans also deployed infantry guns, the 7.5 and 15cm infantry gun, which would have been towed by horses or tractors. Both Heroic and Ross and GHQ offer these weapon systems, with GHQ being of high quality but costly, and Heroic and Ross being much cheaper but lower quality. I tend to use Heroic and Ross for towed guns, adding tractors and crews as required. I tend to make my off-playing area artillery as attractive as possible, often including the tractor and crew. As they are deployed off the playing area, the base depth is normally not an issue. At this scale, engineers are optional, and I've had no reason to field them. They would be infantry elements with figures doing engineering activities on them. There is a range of German engineers from Heroic and Ross, which include mine clearers, flamethrowers, infantry with satchel charges, pole charges, SS pioneers, and infantry with anti-tank mines. Engineers would normally be transported in large trucks, or an engineer version of the SDK of s3e52. I would tend to give them a miss at this scale, but players may wish to be a bit creative and make some interesting engineer diorama if they want to include them. Within the divisional structure, the Germans have a reasonably good range of tanks to choose from. But if we look at the 1st Panzer Division, we need lots of Panzer IIs or Panzer Is, some Panzer 4Cs and one Panzer III. GHQ offers 5 of these tanks for $11.95 US each. Heroic and Ross offers these tanks for 50p each. I tend to go with GHQ here, as you don't get many tanks and getting the best quality is very desirable. Each infantry element should consist of 4 figures, so this represents 72 infantry figures. Players need to determine how they wish to mount their own infantry, but this is a good guide. The big question is the trucks. Many players do not bother to purchase any trucks at this scale, as the troops are commonly dismounted when they enter the playing area. For heavy weapons, I mount the weapon with 3 or 4 figures around it. If the weapon is obvious, such as a very heavy mortar or something, 3 figures as crew is all you really need. If not, then I would mount 4, which allows you quickly identify a heavy weapons element. Heroic and Ross sells 50 infantry figures for £4 and 50 heavy weapon figures for £4. Heroic and Ross sells trucks for 65p per vehicle. The infantry company from the infantry division is almost identical to the motorised infantry company, except with a 5cm mortar element and no motor transports. You will need 2 of these formations, requiring 3 50-figure packs from Heroic and Ross. The battalion would contain 4 MMG elements and a 5cm mortar element. The mortars and machine guns would come in the heavy weapons pack from Heroic and Ross. At this point, you should have a force mix which will allow you to play as an attacker or defender in a game, which would be expected to be completed within a day. If you select all the tank options and transports, you'll end up with a force mix consisting of about 160 elements. If you only select one tank option and purchase almost none of the transport, then this will drop to about 80 elements. Using a platoon scale set of rules, that's 1 element equals a platoon, a player will need to deploy a brigade or regiment, although rarely a full-strength brigade or regiment. A player will need a defensive infantry regiment and an offensive tank or mechanised regiment or brigade. In most cases, a player will need a single brigade or regimental headquarters and from 2 to 3 battalion headquarters. You can use the same headquarter elements you had selected for the squad scale game, except it's very rare to have a 3rd battalion at this scale. At platoon scale, it's possible rules will cover air-to-air combat, which would require you to purchase fighters. If you're playing an attack and counterattack scenario, you may require even more fighters. This is because the defender will normally field 3 fighters and the counterattack force will add another 3 fighters and 3 light bombers. I would select a range of different fighter types just for a bit of variety. Observation aircraft are more common at this scale. Your aircraft range should include some 2-engine bombers as well, although, quite frankly, at this scale it's not really required. I normally like the 2-engine bombers because they look cool. The Germans fielded 2 types of field artillery, as I've already mentioned, the 10.5cm and 15cm howitzer, which would typically be off the playing area, even at this scale. At this scale, it would be rare for the 15cm to ever be fielded, so you could consider skipping that. As with the artillery, the anti-aircraft figures will be more common at this scale, although more 37mm anti-tank guns would typically be used. Once again, the force mix you have selected for squad scale is more than adequate. It should be noted that unlike artillery, all these elements should end up on the playing area, so are mandatory. Engineers at this scale are more common, and a player should consider purchasing some figures to represent engineers. It's also more common to use transporting trucks at this scale, especially if you tend to have a game with a lot of movement. At this scale, you typically field, strangely enough, less tank figures. You have a chance to field lots of different tank vehicles at low quantities per vehicle type. If you go down this path, you may end up using Heroic and Ross figures, as you can purchase them individually. I tend to just stay with the squad scale figures in this particular case, and as I indicated earlier, with the tanks I tend to prefer quality, so even though you're going to waste a lot of the tanks, I'd still probably go GHQ for the tanks. The battalion at this scale is smaller in terms of number of elements than the squad scale company, but we do need two of them, so we end up with a lot of infantry, a lot more than the squad scale set of rules. When we move to the defensive forces, we tend to field a similar amount of infantry. As with the other example, the squad scale force mix you've already selected is more than adequate to cover this scale. At this scale, if we select all options and transports, we have a force mix of 150 elements, which, apart from the aircraft, can be taken almost exclusively from the squad force mix that we've already discussed. Using a company scale set of rules, I mean one company equals one element, a player will need to deploy a divisional or a division or equivalent, although rarely a full-strength division. A player will need a defensive infantry division and a defensive panzer division. In most cases, a player will need a divisional headquarters and from 2 to 3 regimental headquarters. You can use the same headquarters elements you had selected for the squad scale set of rules, except it's rare to have a 3rd regiment. We can use the same aircraft force mix as the platoon scale set of rules, except I would certainly consider some 2-engine bombers. We can continue to use the field artillery from our other force mixes, although it's much more common to field the 15 centimetre howitzer at this scale, particularly if there's a chance of counter battery fire. When we look at anti-tank and anti-aircraft elements, we can continue to use the same force mix we've already selected. However, it is rare to use all of them in a typical game. As for engineers are almost always used at this scale, but it would be rare to have more than, let's say, 3 elements. At this scale, we can field a lot more tanks than we could at the platoon scale. However, we can still use our original squad force mix if you so desire. When we look at the motorised infantry, we can once again simply use our earlier motorised infantry force mix at this scale. No need to purchase anything new or different. The same also applies with the non-motorised infantry. Just simply use the infantry that you have for your squad scale set of rules at this scale. At this scale, a lot of rounding does occur, which is one difference. This gives each player a reasonable amount of flexibility. If you're using a set of rules with strength points, you'll need more different element types. But using LWRS, we end up with 2 regiments of 2 battalion-sized element mixes. To be safe, you could expand this to 3 regiments of 2 battalions or 2 regiments of 3 battalions. While the elements required do vary depending on the rules selected and also the scale selected, but not as much as you'd think. In this example, we could easily build up a force mix using the elements from our platoon scale force mix, which would cover pretty much any scale and most sets of rules. The only exceptions are when a particular set of rules have things like, for example, company scale sets of rules do field platoon scale size units, and that occurs with Panzer Corps, and also a platoon scale set of rules such as FFT3, which fields squad units or special teams. Let's look at our conclusion. If you're uncertain what scale you wish to play, then this chart can allow you to determine what to purchase, which will cover all scales of rules ranging from squad to company. If players are aware of the rules they wish to use, then they can look at the army lists within those rules to get a more accurate force mix. But this video is designed for players that really don't know what sort of rules they wish to play or scale, and who want sufficient flexibility to allow them to play a wide range of different rules. And so we come to an end of episode 51 of my figure gaming hobby series of videos, in this case building up a German 1939 force mix for a range of different scales. Alle guten Ding, kommen zu einem Ende.